The Vancouver Regional Construction Association's 2022 Awards of Excellence Gala will be held at the Vancouver Convention Centre West on Wednesday, October 26th. Over 600 industry peers are expected to attend in order to recognize individual and company achievements and celebrate construction successes together. The awards are also a great opportunity for companies to demonstrate their commitment to quality and professionalism in local construction. For more information or to register, visit vrca.ca/AOE, call 604-293-6595, or email awards@vrca.ca. The VRCA looks forward to celebrating construction's excellence with you. Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey. On this episode, I have a couple of interviews from the British Columbia Construction Safety Alliance's recent Health and Safety Conference in Vancouver. It was their first in-person conference since the start of the pandemic, and the keynote speaker on the first day was Kate Campbell. Campbell's known for her roles on Holmes and many other HGTV shows, but she's also a carpenter, business owner, and a tireless advocate for both the skilled trades and getting tools in the hands of more women on more job sites. Here's my interview with her from the conference.
Hi, I am Kate Campbell. I'm a contractor, carpenter. I've worked on HGTV Canada for the last 15 years, and I also run my own contracting company.
And we're here at the BCCSA Safety Conference, but let's start with the HGTV. That was your first job out of school, which, I worked in television. That alone is intimidating. Doing that and being an actual tradesperson on television, I can't even fathom how tough that must have been.
It was definitely one of those things that you, at the beginning of the day, you're kind of shaking in your work boots, and it's intimidating to walk onto a job site as a woman to begin with, but then, like you mentioned, to walk onto a job site with cameras on you, being asked technical questions about what you're doing in the industry, and then to put together sentences that make sense while also building and learning was a challenge, to say the least. But I also knew it was an incredible opportunity. I don't think I embraced how much of an opportunity it would be for me to really put a spotlight on women in the skilled trades, but throughout my career, I realized as I was a part of more TV shows, as one of the only women on job sites, that there needed to be some tough conversations and that I could really encourage change within the industry as well.
Now, there's a whole lot of places we can go with the only woman on a job site part. Let's start with the fact that you said in your presentation that once a woman or more than one woman is on the job site, people tend to clean up their act.
Mm-hmm. They do, and it's one of those tricky conversations that you want to have, but when you bring up the old boys club, there's always people's backs go up a little bit. But it's completely true. I've walked onto job sites, and allies, men that want you there, really enjoy the fact that it's a more professional atmosphere, that you're having conversations that are actually really great conversations instead of kind of really brutal conversations. So they're not, in just that regard alone, that it's a great way to look at bringing different air to a job site. But then the fact that women are detail-oriented, and I brought up in my talk about work smarter, not harder, I'm always thinking about ways that I can make the job site work better and allow for more production and not be as hard on my own body and make things work for me. So.
Now, you mentioned that you were very thick-skinned and you ran into many roadblocks that you got past, but not everybody is as thick-skinned, which is not a criticism, it's just the way of the world.
Yeah.
So they tend maybe to give up because it's just too much to deal with. What are some of the roadblocks that can be gotten rid of so that doesn't happen?
I would also say that thick-skinned is a good quality, but it shouldn't have to again. So, which is why these roadblocks need to be removed. I would say being able to walk onto a job site, feeling confident that you belong there, with proper work gear that's sized for you as well. There's not a lot of availability in terms of when I first started in the trade 16 years ago, I had the option of 2 work boots, and one of them was pink, and it was just if you want to be considered a professional on a job site, you also have to have the proper gear. We're at a safety conference, and you also have to feel good and safe about that gear, that it'll provide you the safety and allow you to do your job in a manner that doesn't put you into harm's way. So lifting barriers in terms of access to workwear, we talked a lot about different mentorship programs, so providing mentorship to women as well, allowing them access to that information so they know that they're not alone, as an employer, being the one to even step outside of the job site and let it be known, or ask the question, how can I be an ally if you need one? So there's a lot of different ways that we can start to encourage a more beneficial job site experience for women.
My last question is kind of a two-parter. Is you said there you've seen the problem is not just the kids. Kids are encouraged to go into skilled trades, or you encourage them, and they get excited about it, but then their parents are the roadblocks. So maybe you can speak to that, because I've been to a lot of these things. I've never heard that before. I think it's pretty obvious, though.
That's one of the things that didn't become obvious to me until I started doing these talks more. And I had several students come up to me and say, I would love to get into skilled trades, but that's not even an option for me because my parents won't allow me. And it made me also realize that I was very fortunate to have supportive parents, but a lot of kids do not have the same support. They have parents that went to university, so they want their kids to follow in the same path, even if they know that it might not be the best path for them. So over the years, my conversations and the way that I speak, and even the events that I want to be a part of, have shifted in terms of like who I think we need to target, and I think parents are a crucial element to that change.
And finally, I would just ask, since people see you on TV, they see you as an inspiring person, particularly I would assume women, where do they go if they want to learn more?
To learn more about, and I do have actually a resource on my website for women as well. So my website is katebuilds.ca. I'm on social media platforms as Kate Builds, and I try to be as much of an ally and an advocate as I can. So I'm always talking about initiatives or mentorship groups, and trying to put resources out there for women that are thinking about getting into the skilled trades.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next up, I have an interview with WorkSafeBC's Stephen Ma, who gave the conference attendees a deep dive into the British Columbia Safety Regulator's construction high-risk strategy.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm a OHS consultant with WorkSafeBC.
So I guess I'll start with when you did the presentation, you talked about, and we both hate to say this, the positive aspect of the pandemic, but there was one in terms of safety, and what was that?
Yeah, it was just that for a lot of employers that hadn't considered health and safety as a priority, it really put it at the forefront, and it had them not just thinking about health and safety, but actually encouraging them to implement controls on an almost ongoing basis as everything was changing so frantically.
Mm-hmm. And one thing you talked about, and you joked that you endlessly talked about, it was the hierarchy of controls. So maybe you could explain to the audience what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hierarchy of controls is a way that we look at controlling risks and hazards in a workplace. And for our perspective, what we want to encourage people to do is the hierarchy requires that you start at the top of it and work its way down. So whenever we can, we want to eliminate the risks or the hazards. If you can't do that, we want to engineer it out. If not, then we go down to administrative, and then lastly PPE. I think the key, though, is that too often we focus on the PPE as being the only line of defense, and that really should be our last resort.
And the reason you're here is to talk about the construction high-risk strategy for WorkSafeBC. So maybe you could explain, there are 4 or 5 key focus points for this.
Absolutely. So the 4 areas that we were focusing on were falls from elevation, with an emphasis on ladders, because it's one of those fall hazards that we don't consider being risky, but it actually is a leading cause of some of our more serious injuries. Then it was struck-bys, which is the idea is we want to remove the amount of interaction between people and machinery and equipment, and through design we can do that quite well. And then it was musculoskeletal, so with our workforces getting older, with the repetition of the work, we just want to be cognizant of the physical demands and the risk of overexertion for our workforces. And then lastly was high voltage, which for us represents potentially catastrophic risk, and just understanding the need to plan for 10 and that everyone has a responsibility to making sure it can be done safely.
Maybe you could elaborate on the Plan for 10.
Yeah, so the Plan for 10 is an initiative that we have where we're trying to highlight that every party has a responsibility, be it the owner with the budget, be it the utility provider who has the ability to come out and potentially bury the lines or reroute the energy source, to the employers that have to educate their workers that there is high risk because of high voltage, and equipment operators and so on.
And one of the other things you did was, the kind of theme that came to mind was, and you illustrated this by everybody crossing their arms and then crossing the other way and feeling how weird it was. That's kind of how safety is. People don't think about it because it's not first priority, I guess.
Absolutely, and that little demonstration was just to try to illustrate how often we make decisions or think a certain way with without really questioning or understanding why. It's just sort of second nature, and health and safety is very similar. The same, where we just don't consider health and safety because we've just always done it this way. Why would we change?
And just in terms of inside regulatory baseball, you said during the session that every 2 to 3 years this is looked at, and it started in 2015. So maybe get a little bit of history of the construction high-risk strategy.
Absolutely. So it did start in 2015, where we were looking at the serious injury rates, certainly in construction, and also hearing from our stakeholders that there were certain areas that, maybe we could do more on. Maybe we can give them some specific resources and specific help. And so that was sort of the genesis of the strategy itself. And it's expanded over the last, I guess, 7 years now, where every 3 years we kind of, continual improvement. So year 1, you look at it, year 2, you look at it, year 3, we're like, okay, some significant changes have occurred. Let's refocus the whole strategy on what is industry telling us needs to be, what is our statistics and our data saying, our areas we need to focus on. And so it's just been a continual evolution. And I would imagine in 2024 and beyond, it'll change again.
And you also emphasized the importance of stakeholder interaction, which you're already doing, but you wanted to encourage it. Somebody you can go into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, certainly at WorkSafe, is that our stakeholders are such a key resource to the work that we do. In fact, they drive a lot of the work that we do. So with that being said, why don't we want more interaction? And we are certainly leveraging our great relationship with BCCSA and some of the other agencies and their technical advisory committees, because that feedback is what's going to make a big difference in helping us move beyond that sort of 2% that we've been stuck at for the longest time, is getting that direct involvement.
And finally, you said that because of the pandemic, and maybe before that, WorkSafeBC was moving more into education and consultation because that was where you saw the most need at the time. So we could go into that.
Yeah, so actually the department I've just joined is called Consultation Education Services, and it's sort of an understanding from WorkSafe's perspective that enforcement should always be there. It's an underpinning, it's important, absolutely. But there are a lot of employers that want to do the right thing that just don't necessarily know how to. They just either don't have the knowledge or the resources and could benefit from having some field level engagement. So that's where Consultation Education Services is hoping to fill that gap and help create that sort of holistic approach to health and safety and prevention.
And finally, I know WorkSafeBC has a ton of resources on their site, but maybe you could point people specifically to where to go to find out all this stuff.
Absolutely. So if you go to WorkSafeBC.com, if you click on health and safety, it'll actually give you almost an alphabet. And depending on what you're looking for, it's actually quite helpful to just say, if I wanted to talk about falls, I would go to F, click on F, and you can find all of our related resources on falls from elevation. That's how I would get there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You can listen to the Construction Record podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify, as well as on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.